Welcome to the Author Roundup. This special segment of the Book Connection Show features up-and-coming indie authors who sit down with us and talk about their recently released books. Join us as we chat with our next guest author. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Author Roundup. My name is Emma, and I am your host for today's episode. Today, I have with me self-published author Robin Louise. She is the author of A New World is Coming. Robin Louise has written her book to teach and warn people about the dangers that are soon coming. The Holy Bible has told of these events for years past, and people have not believed that they would encounter them. Robin has written this book in an easy format for anyone to understand. Hello, Robin. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me on.
Of course. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to get into your book and discover more about you and your self-publishing journey. But for starters, can you tell us a little bit more about A New World is Coming, your latest released book?
My newly released book is actually a revised version of my original book that I made 18 years ago about.
Wow.
Ever since then, there's been so many prophecies from the Bible that is happening in the world today. I kept collecting all these extra notes, and I decided to put them together just a couple of years ago. I started putting them together, and then I thought last year, I've got to revise this book and add this because there's so much more here. And I don't want people to end up being deceived and going through tough times without having some concept of information out of these prophecies, because if you're not watching it closely, you just don't see it. And the biggest thing is people think that the Lord's coming is sometime in the future. They've been putting that off to where people don't think they have to go through it. But the fact is, my book proves that we are going through the book of Revelations right now. We're going through the end times, and it's that close before the Lord comes. And there's so many things they need to know. And I'm just glad I revised it and put it out.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So when did you start writing things down? When did you start writing all these little notes?
I've been taking notes for several years. I've got 2 drawers full of notes. And what I had to do is go through and pick through which ones were really pertinent. And the last, I started this about, I'm thinking a year ago.
Okay.
And I had to go through the editing process. And that's a process I didn't go through that with my first book. And I'm so glad that I went through the editing process. And so that helped me really recognize what was really pertinent and what stuff wasn't. So anyways, I'm glad that I used the editing process with this.
So your book discussed the concept of being prepared for Christ's second coming, like you mentioned, and the importance of readiness for the rapture. What motivated you to explore those themes just a little bit more? Can you go into that a little bit more?
For years, 20 years, I lived in Northern California, and I didn't see my family that often. And I ended up moving down to Southern California near my family about 20 years ago. And I was sitting around the table visiting with my mom and my sister. And I mentioned about the Lord coming. And my sister turned and looked at me and she said, what are you talking about? And I said, Christ's second coming. There's so many issues that shows that prophecy is coming true. And my mom says, I'm not sure we want to hear about all this, Robin. And she says, just, go through it yourself if that's your religion. And I says, it's not a religion. I said, it's actually meant for everybody around the world. It's what's happening. And I was scared to death when I went home. That bothered me so much that they're clueless. I love them. My mom's passed away now. And what was amazing, I was sitting in the kitchen doing dishes, and I thought, I've got to leave them a letter. I've got to write them a letter, letting them know that after the rapture takes place, they need to know what happened to me, and I don't want them taking the mark of the beast. So when I sat down to write my letter, there was so many issues that I kept coming up with. And then I had to divide those issues. It ended up going into chapters. I was not intending to write a book. It was only supposed to be a letter.
It just happened. Yeah.
Pardon me?
It just happened.
It just happened. Yeah. And my daughter at the time was 11, and she says, are you writing a book, Mother? And I says, well, I guess it's ending up that way. And that was when I first started my first book. And I printed that up myself, and I gave it to them and the rest of my family, cousins, aunts, and uncles. And most people in my family, most of them enjoyed it. And that's how I ended up with my book. And what was amazing is, the thoughts are in your head. And I thought, am I explaining this well enough? So when I was done with the chapter, I gave it to my 11-year-old daughter. She was in 6th grade. And I said, here, I want you to circle the words you don't know and underline the sentences that you don't understand. And she did that. And when I went to her and I asked her, I said, what don't you understand about this sentence? I said, you remember Adam and Eve and what happened in the Garden of Eden? I went on and I explained it. And she says, well, explain that. And I thought, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? But you've got these thoughts that in your head, and you don't always convey that down in writing.
Right.
So pardon me?
You just assume that they know what you're talking about.
You assume that. And a lot of people don't know half of their Bible or have understanding of that. So anyways, I had her proofread all my chapters. And it made me feel a lot better to have her go through them so I could express a lot more issues. So that's how I started my book.
Wow, that's so cool. That's so insightful that you thought about that perspective and that you were really wanting it to be understood on a whole another level, like completely. So that's cool that you grabbed her and let her
so that's why it ended up being simplified, because she was a bright student, but she was in 6th grade. But I feel that the Lord also led me to so many issues too in my writing. So anyways.
Could you share some insights into the process of researching and writing about biblical prophecies, and how you approached presenting the information in a compelling and accessible way?
My cousin had this computer disc, and it showed you. Now you could see it on the internet, but back 20 years ago, most of the time pastors and people that really led Bible studies and whatever had biblical information. And so what it did is it showed all these different Bibles. You got to pick out which ones, and I always stuck with 4 mainline Bibles. And when you put in a word like Christ coming, They
Mhm.
would lead you to all these different scriptures throughout the Bible. And that's when I picked out what I needed to say and write down. So I ended up writing all these notes on what the scriptures actually said about that word. And then it would give you other scriptures in Second Thessalonians about his coming. So then I would go to Second Thessalonians,
Mhm.
and then I would pick out those statements. So I ended up using several, like 4 different Bibles, but they would all say
Okay.
the same thing, but they'll read a little bit different. And I always wanted to pick out the one that read the easiest and smoothest for understanding in my process of writing. So I ended up getting all my scriptures and all my thoughts from the Bible.
Yeah, that's great.
Plus, it
Um,
had a lot of research too. There's I'm sorry to interrupt.
oh,
There's
you're fine.
a pastor that I would watch on TV,
Uh-huh.
and he was excellent. I have watched several different pastors give explanation of the book of Revelations. And I prayed to the Lord, I want to understand this book because
Mhm.
I could never understand Revelations.
Mhm.
And he led me to this one TV pastor, and that's all he studies is Revelations. And everything that he explained made so much
That
sense.
makes. Mhm.
So I went through him and followed a lot of his knowledge. And also, he gave scriptures, and I would look it up in the scriptures. So
That's
that
yeah,
was
that's so great to have books like yours where, it's easy to understand, and I love that you focused on the formatting and to make sure that people have that source to be able to fully understand certain aspects of certain prophecies and books and the Bible in itself. So, that's great that you went that route as far as, like, publishing something, um, that had that as a focus.
Yeah, I didn't want to get too in depth with my book.
Technical?
I
Yeah.
wanted to
There's
keep
so
it.
many technical books out there, right? Like
There's so many books out there, and if they really want to know, they can go to that subject and look more depth into it. But so many
right,
people who don't understand, they don't
right.
want a thick, heavy book that they have to go through. So that's why I kept it in a simplified format.
Yeah, that's great. How do you envision your book impacting readers, who may be seeking guidance and understanding, about the events, prophesied in the Bible and how it's significant in today's world?
I am hoping that I am able to, I want to put together meetings. Meetings is not the right term. I want to put together something where I can invite people into my home, and then if it
Mhm.
grew, providing it grow, go to different churches, go to different places, and have other interviews where I can answer their questions, because there's so
Mhm.
many things that are happening right now. It is hard to keep up with it and to
Yeah.
correlate these prophecies with what is happening now.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we're going to see a big change, because the Lord says before he comes, he's going to set up a new government, a government that will be just and fair and will carry on into the new world after the Lord comes.
Mhm.
And we're going to see that change, and that it's going to shock a lot of people,
Mhm.
because I've heard that this major change is already put together. They've already put it together. They just haven't placed it yet. And that is soon going to happen. And people are going to want to know and understand what our government is doing.
Right.
And instead of being afraid of it, they need to know how to deal with it.
Yeah,
Because
prepared.
it's something that the Lord is actually putting together.
Right. So your book emphasizes the urgency, like we've talked about, right, of being prepared for Christ's return. What advice would you offer to individuals who may be um, grappling with the faith or fear, feeling unprepared for these prophesized events?
With these major changes that are soon to take place, there's going to be good things about it, and there's going to be a lot of changes that are not going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible does explain that. And Christians, people who want to be with the Lord in eternity, need to understand what they're dealing with. And I have shown this in my book with
Mm-hmm.
guidance on,
Mm-hmm.
that's why I explain the New Jerusalem. Most of them don't know what the New Jerusalem is, and is actually, it is, if you're familiar with paradise that was in the beginning of time for Adam and Eve, that's going to be called the New Jerusalem, and it's going to come down from heaven. And when it comes down, it is going to be so magnificent for those who love the Lord to live there. And we're still going to be here on earth, but we're not going to deal with pain, sickness, and sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And my book explains all that, how it's going to be. And so many people never knew all this stuff.
Yeah.
I've been to several different churches my whole life, and nobody ever speaks of what the new world is going to be like, or even the book of Revelations.
Mm-hmm.
So people need to know when they're going through tough times now, before the Lord comes, they need to stay solid with Christ and look forward to the new world and how it's going to be in the future.
Mm-hmm. So what inspired you to self-publish your book, A New World is Coming?
Because I know that churches aren't really explaining what is going on in today's world, and people are not prepared. They need to know what issues, what changes, what happens when the entire financial system crashes and switches over to the new financial system. That's all part of our government changing. That's
Mm-hmm.
going to freak them out.
Yeah.
I just want people to know and understand that this is all part of God's plan, and they need to know how to deal with it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
anyways, I just felt I need to publish this. And
Yeah.
I feel that the Lord was pushing me, because the more I learned, the more I thought, no, that's too much. I don't think I can do this. And the Lord kept telling me, yes, you can. So I kept thinking, well, I'm going to do what the Lord asked me to do, and whatever I can do to help people go through the coming troubled times ahead, that's what I'd like to do.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you did. It's always like great to be able to share your thoughts and feelings publicly, and hope that it inspires and guides people. And so how is your book laid out specifically, maybe for people to understand? You said that there's like guidance in there. Are there specific scriptures, or is it more like a personal testimony, or how is it laid out?
It's not really a personal testimony.
Okay.
I wrote the center, the main chapters. And then I was coming home from church one day, and I heard a message from the pastor explaining he was so good at it. He explained how the Bible, the different prophecies, I should say the prophets who explained all this in the Bible, what they did to prove that the Bible is valid. It's not just something that men drew up. And I pulled over on the side of the road because I had all these thoughts in my head and I had to write it down.
Before you
And I thought,
forgot, yeah.
yes, I did. And I thought, no, there's too much here. So what I did is I went back to the church about a week later and I bought the tape, because they tape all their services.
Oh, yeah.
And I wrote in the beginning, before the chapter begins, I explained all these different verses and scriptures that
Mhm.
prove the Bible is real.
Mhm.
It's I mean, you have one prophet in one country, and then in another country, a couple hundred years later, and they're both saying the same thing, and they never read each other's notes. They had no communication, yet they're saying the same thing.
Mhm.
And that happened with several prophets. So I wrote nearly a chapter just on believing in
Mhm.
the scriptures.
Okay.
So that's what I did. Hopefully that will help people
Yeah.
to believe what they are reading.
Right. Yeah. And so how long did it take you to complete your book, the revised one, I guess, as
Uh-huh.
far as like self-publishing or no, writing it and self-publishing it and then editing. So how long did it take basically?
I started a couple of years ago,
Okay.
and I started putting things together,
Okay.
and I would collect, I was still reading things and collecting more information. So I kept putting things off from putting it together. So
Okay.
about a year ago, that's when I decided to go with the publisher and
Mhm.
put everything together. And it took about a year to actually get them to um, put the whole book together. And it
Mhm.
was published then about 9 months later, because it takes time even for them to get to editing. It took almost 2 months just to wait
Yeah.
for the editing process to get done. So there was a lot of sitting time, and the sitting time was due to collecting more evidence, because too much is happening right now.
Yeah.
And I kept adding, and it's like, at what point? And even now
Yeah.
there's so much happening. So it's like, I just decided, well, you just got to complete this thing and
Yeah,
get it
just
out
get what
there.
you have out now, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was your, writing experience like, I guess, the first time and then also the second time? What were both of them like compared to each other?
Um, I had a writing class in college, which helped me immensely.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
put it together, right? Not just an English class, it was a writing class.
Mhm.
And she was really good. And I know that that contributed to me being able to organize things better. But when the original book was made, I went through all those scriptures, like I had mentioned, biblically,
Yeah.
and I had to categorize it. I had to put the thoughts, how they came, um, to help the different chapters be correct. And I ended up adding more chapters. And even in the end, I had to conclude, where I don't think I had it in the first book. Um, there's a lot more in the revised version that I put
Mhm.
into preparing yourself. There's quite a bit there that I processed extra to prepare, and where it's been compared to what the Israelites went when they left Egypt with Moses,
Mhm.
and they had to leave, and what they went through. This is compared to about the same thing, and I've heard a lot of preachers state this, and I took the scriptures that they had and looked it up myself and put it together so it made sense. But at the end, I added like a prayer at the end for people to accept the Lord. And there's just, I fine-tuned it. It just came out a lot better the second time around. So
Yeah.
yeah, it explains a lot more.
Okay, perfect. Is there any part of your writing experience that stuck with you? Anything in your writing experience that maybe brought you closer to God? Was there like any healing like process or anything that you felt connected to writing and helped you in your faith?
Yes, a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
And I've shared this with very few people, but I'll share it with you and my viewers. It was the first night back 18 years ago when I sat down at my computer and going through these scriptures and realizing I was putting together a book here. And before I went to bed that night, I prayed to the Lord. I said, Lord, please show me what you want me to put in this book. I said, I'm doing this for you and your people. And he showed me in a vision, and I still get chills thinking about it. I had a vision of the Lord coming down from the east with the New Jerusalem just coming down in like a ball of light, all these rays of light coming down.
Oh, wow.
And you couldn't see any buildings or anything around you. And the thoughts in my head was a new world is coming. And when I woke up, and I didn't want to wake up. I wanted to go with the Lord. It's such an intense feeling. I wanted to stay, and yet I had my 11-year-old daughter. But you don't think about that. You
Right.
just want to be with the Lord. And I knew that he knew about this book. And I thought, I have to name it A New World is Coming. And that's why on the front cover, I wanted to put a rays of light. It isn't as good as what my vision was, but that's what I feel the Lord wanted. And then what was amazing, and the very next night, when I was sitting at my computer, my daughter got out of the shower with a towel wrapped around her head. And she says to me, Mom, I sang this song in the shower, but I don't know how this song got into my head. And she says, I don't even know where the words came from or the tune. And I said, well, sing it to me. And she sang it, and she said, shoot, I blanked. Anyways, it was about the new world coming. And she said, the new world. And she said, I don't want to be left behind. And there was, it's a song that you could pretty much sing in church, and it replicated like 3 times, and tears just rolled down my face. And she said, you didn't like my song? And I said, oh my God. I said, no. I said, I love it. To me, that was a confirmation that the Lord was giving me through her. She wasn't going to be 12 until September, and I started in April of doing it. And she really didn't know what all I was doing yet. And she just sang this song, and it was all, oh, good news, Jesus is a coming, good news, Jesus is a coming, good news, Jesus is a coming, and I don't want him to leave me behind. There'll be peace and freedom in the new world. Yeah. And then she sang that 2 more times. And she said, but I added the yeah part, because she said it just needed it. But anyway, she sang that so preciously.
Aw.
And I thought I felt pretty close to the Lord before that, but I
But
really
after.
got to know the Lord in understanding. I prayed that he would help me understand the book of Revelations, and he did. I understood it through all the scriptures, everything that he showed me, and the vision, and then her song just told me that the Lord was approving what I was doing.
Oh my gosh. Did you
So,
put that in your book? You should have put that in your book.
you know, I did in the
You should.
first one. I put her
Oh,
song
okay.
in the first one, and I
Aw.
didn't in the second one. And I thought, I don't know if people are gonna want that in the, you know, you're
I loved
pushed so
it.
much into concise and editing,
Yeah.
and I wondered if
Hard.
I should have put it in the second one. But yeah. Anyway,
What
so maybe someday somebody will make a
Yeah.
song out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is there a part of your book that is the most compelling part to write without giving too much away? Was there a part of your book that holds a really special place in your heart, or is it just all together?
All of it leads you to understanding the end times. But I would say what I feel is really strong and compelling. I explained, and a lot of people don't know this. Some people do. It depends on their church and what they've learned. But the Lord says you need to honor the 7 holy feasts. And that was in Leviticus. That's in the Old Testament. But as you know, in Matthew, Christ said he did not come to relinquish the law, he came to fulfill it. So if the 7 holy feasts, he's to fulfill it, he has fulfilled 4 of them. At Easter time, you have Good Friday. The second one is the day after. You have Easter is the first fruits, and then you have Pentecost. Those are 4 holy feasts that Christ has fulfilled. The only 3 that he hasn't fulfilled yet is Feast of Trumpets. You have the Atonement, which is about 10 days later. And then you have Tabernacles, which is then a month later. We'll be at home with him. The Lord is coming on the Feast of Trumpets. We don't know what year yet, but we will know the year because he says he's going to come 7 years after the tribulation starts. And it's about to start. And he says in there, and I gave the scripture, he says that everybody should know the season he is coming. The season he is coming is the fall. I don't know what fall yet, but we're supposed to know that. We just don't know the day or the hour. He doesn't say you won't know anything else, but we won't know the day or the hour. Well, the Feast of Trumpets is 2 days. So you don't know which one of those days or the hour. And I feel that is very compelling, and people need to. Yeah, it is compelling. He's going to fill those 3 holy feasts, and you need to be honoring those all the 7 holy feasts. They need to be honored.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's very compelling to me.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. As a self-published author, what motivated you to choose this route for sharing your story? And what have been the key benefits? And I guess we talked about editing as like a challenge you've encountered through the self-publishing process.
The editing, I'd never gone through that, and I didn't go through that with my first book.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't have the money for it. I had to pay for this myself. and it's been expensive, but I thought, I'm doing this for the Lord. I need to do the best I can all the way through. And the editing process was so different. They have you edit all the chapters all the way through. What sentences, what should you leave out? What should you leave in? And I'm thinking that took me a couple of months. I reread that thing, and then I'd send it back in, and they send it back to me. You need to edit more. And
Yeah.
so I was
So
learning about
expensive.
that process. Then it was ready for the next editing, which is line by line editing. And it took 2 months because they were so busy. And when we finally got to that, then it was line by line. They put the corrections for the punctuation, for certain things that have its anyways, I thought I punctuated everything right, but it's been several years since I've been in college, and you have to, there's a certain way to punctuate for the scriptures. And yeah, I went through that, and it really cleans up the book a lot. So I was really happy I went through the editing process. That was good.
Yeah. What about the like design? You mentioned the cover a little bit. What was it like seeing your book come to life? What was it like seeing your book for the first time?
I liked it, and yet a part of me was sort of disappointed because I have the real vision in my head of what I wanted the vision to look like, with the New Jerusalem coming down from the clouds. And I just couldn't get that on the internet. There wasn't.
Yeah, hard to get it.
Yeah, I spent so much time for all the photos. I spent months trying to get the correct photos that I wanted in the book. And I just learned that I love the book. When I was finally sent the book, I am very happy with it. I thought it looked really good.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I came up with, I just pray every time I sat down to write. I always prayed that the Lord would help me, and I had to write the backside myself. All of it I wrote myself with Lord's guidance. So I'm happy with the book. I really am. This last revised version is I think great, and I think everybody needs to read it to really have a start of understanding of what is shortly going to start coming down and continue till the Lord comes, all the changes.
What has been the feedback from readers and the broader community since the release of your book? Has there been any particular memorable responses or interactions that have impacted you?
When I wrote the first time, and I would say almost all of that is in my revised version. That's pretty much the same. I was working still, and there was a lot of staff that wanted a book, and they all had very good things to say about it. And one of my clerks said to me, I read it through twice.
Oh, that's so
And I think
nice.
the one that mattered the most was when I first wrote it. Before I gave my book out to anybody, my coworker, she says, are you going to give me one of those books? I want to read it. And she's a believer in Christ. I don't know how often she goes to church. She's I didn't know too much about her personal life. But as she was reading it at work, and during the slow times, and then she had to get up and wait on people. She was a receptionist, and she kept making comments because of certain things that I put in there. She
Mm-hmm.
says, I didn't know this. I didn't know anything about this. I've never heard this before. She kept making those comments. She says,
Mm-hmm.
why doesn't the church? Well, I go to
Yeah.
church and nobody's ever said anything like this. And when
Yeah.
she got done with the book, she was going to give it back to me. And I told her, no, you keep it. And you might want to reread it or give it to a friend. And she said, everyone needs to read this book. And she kept pointing her finger to it. She said, I
Oh,
mean, everyone should read this book because almost everything in it I have never heard before. And she goes to church quite often, but they're not getting into the end times.
yeah. And that was your goal, right? You wanted to
Yes.
create a book
Mhm.
that people are not aware of certain things, and she was very not aware of certain things.
Yeah,
Oh, that must
right.
feel like amazing that you impacted someone like that. One person, let alone like a lot of people.
Yeah,
Wow.
right.
That's so cool. What has been the feedback from reception from your family and friends and your faith community?
I had a cousin call me to tell me because I mailed a lot of them out.
Oh,
And
that's great.
my cousin called me and he'd been married. I hadn't seen him for years. And he said to me, he said, I forget what was his wife's name? I forget, Judy. Anyways, he said, Judy and I both read your book. And he says, that was really great. He said, I can't believe you wrote it. And he says, the rest of my fit, we're going to give it to her kids to read it. And so it was just a short conversation. And I had a couple of aunts call me and tell me how great it was. And my mother, if you remember in the beginning, she
Yeah.
didn't want to hear about, her and my sister didn't want to hear anything negative
Yeah. Yeah.
about the end. It's like it scared them.
Yeah.
And a lot of people feel that way. And if you
Mhm.
know the Lord and know how it's going to go, you won't be afraid.
Mhm.
And my mother didn't want to know anything. But as time went on, in the last couple of years before she died, I'd go
Mhm.
to her house to spend time with her. And she was so proud of my book and so glad
Aw.
that I didn't listen to her years before that. She said, this is a beautiful book. And we would have her family gatherings at Thanksgiving or Christmas, her birthday. And the last couple of years at every family gathering before we ate, she would shut everybody up so we could have a prayer. And she never used to do that. I always wanted
Aw.
to. And she got so upset with the guys because they were watching football. She went over, turned the TV off. We're having prayer before dinner. And
Aw.
she always had me lead the prayer. And that
That's
was
so
such a good
special.
feeling. And 6 months before she died, I spent every weekend with her. And I was
Mhm.
working at the time. Sometimes I would take off on a Friday or a Monday so to have more time with her. And about 6 months before that, she was laying on the couch and she said, I want you to come over here and pray for me.
Mm.
And my cousin was there and he was never raised in a church. He didn't ever understand much about the Bible. And he said, can I pray with you guys? I said, yes,
Aw.
of course. So the three of us held hands. Well, there was actually four. My stepdad came over and joined us. And she said, would you ask the Lord to take me home? She says, I don't want to live anymore. I hurt.
Hmm.
And I prayed with her and I prayed for the Lord's will to be done, to either take her pain away or take her when he's ready for her. And anyways, it was a long prayer and I was
Mm.
just so happy because it gave me confirmation of her eternity, that she wanted to be with the Lord. And that made me feel, I still get goosebumps thinking about
I
it.
got oh my gosh,
And
I'm
after
like
she,
getting
yeah,
teary-eyed, like, listening to you.
and even after when she was in a hospice, and she was already on morphine and laying in her bed. Um, she hadn't died yet, but she was about to. She couldn't eat or drink anything. She just laid there. And all the grandkids who were all in their 30s, 40s, the whole room was filled around her bed. And they're not used to praying. They're not used to getting close. But I think if anything, my book, I don't know how many of them have read my book, but I feel that they all still got closer to God. And
Yeah.
I said a prayer, we all joined hands, and she they were glad, they felt close to God. And that's my main purpose, is to get people to get to know him, get close to him. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid.
Oh gosh, that's so amazing that your faith and your writing and your book brought you and your family closer, and that's just so
It did.
special. That alone is so special.
Yeah.
Well, if that's not a reason enough to write a book, what advice would you give to a writer working on his or her book?
You know, the best thing that I learned when I was writing, you have to have a notepad with you wherever you go,
Yeah.
because I had spent too many times either in a doctor's office or driving home from church, or riding in a car doing something. And you're always thinking of your book. The thoughts are in your head. And when those different thoughts come in your head, you have to write them down right then and
You
there.
do. Yeah.
You pull over in a parking lot and you write them down, because when you go to sit down to write, you don't necessarily remember all those thoughts. It then all comes back to you as soon as you look at your notes. And
Mhm.
I would say
Good advice.
yeah, you have to write down your thoughts. I got up in the middle of the night after I had dreams. The Lord would send me messages in my dreams. It was even at work one time when I was still working. And I would go on my breaks and I would write all this stuff down. It was interfering with my job.
Yeah.
And I asked the Lord, I said, Lord, please put those thoughts off. Don't put those thoughts in my head until I'm not at work. And he did. It was amazing. He
Wow.
answers your questions. And as soon as Friday came, man, I was writing from Friday night till Sunday night. All the thoughts were there. So yeah, you got to keep those thoughts and
Yeah.
write them down. If you're doing
Yeah.
a publishing,
Definitely.
have it edited, because that really helps.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anything coming up for you next? What's next for you as an author or personally? Do you have anything happening this year that you're excited about?
I want to have these special meetings. I don't know if you would call it a church gathering. It's more like a Bible study.
Like you want a sense of community, right?
Yes, I want a
Yeah.
sense of community. And that's my daughter and her friends. They've all gotten a book and they're asking questions, how it relates. And so that is what my goal is to
Okay.
start off and just explain what is going on now, because you can't, it'd be too difficult for me to start writing a book, because by the time you start writing a book with everything that's going on, it, prophecies are happening daily. And I think these major big changes are going to happen within the
Mhm.
next couple of months.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Yeah. Do you have a website or an email address that you would like viewers
Oh,
to if you would like to share so people could contact you?
yes. I wrote that down. It is www dot a new world is coming, that's all lowercase, .net,
Okay.
net at the end. And if you contact me, there's a place on there to contact me. I go in there and I check that, and if you have questions, I will answer your questions. So yeah, please feel free to
Yeah,
contact me,
that would be
and
great.
the message gets to me.
Okay. Well, finally, what do you hope readers will take away from your message and from your book?
To be closer to the Lord, not be afraid of what is coming, because we're going to have heaven here on earth. And so many people are afraid of the unknown, but it's going to be a bumpy road until that happens. And I want people to have an understanding of why there's certain things happening that are not good, and there's good things that are going to happen for all the changes. But people need to realize that we are in a spiritual warfare. It's good against evil. And in the end, good, meaning the Lord, when he comes back, he's going to win over the evil. But they really need to understand this, and they have to be strong in their faith. That's the best thing I could tell them. Be strong in their faith no matter what happens, because the Lord is going to help them through the tough times.
That's great. That's inspiring. Thank you. Well, I think that's all the time we have today, Robin. Thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure to talk with you and to discuss your book, A New World is Coming.
I am just really happy that I've had this opportunity, and I'm hoping that the readers will be blessed.
They will be.
to view it.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Yeah, of course. If you're interested in A New World is Coming, if you're interested in contacting Robin, her book is available at westbowpress.com, or as always, you can purchase it through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And then she mentioned, of course, her website. Do you want to mention that again, Robin?
It is www.anewworldiscoming. It's all lowercase, I believe, .net.
Perfect. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Robin, for taking the time to talk about your book, and best of luck to you and your book and your publishing journey as well.
I've loved every minute of it. It's been really inspiring for me.
Thank you. Me as well.
Good.
And thank you to everyone for tuning in, and go and purchase Robin's book today. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.